So, continuing our investigation of the term serpent, we're going to look at a few Bible passages that actually deal with naming things and places with the term serpent. And the interesting thing is that we will find a common theme running through these passages. After Genesis 3, the first time that we come across the term serpent is found in Genesis 49, verses 16 to 18. And this is on the occasion that Jacob is about to bless his sons before he dies. And he says to Dan, his son, Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan shall be a serpent by the way, a viper by the path that bites the horse's heels. Now, in a video for another time, we will see that Dan as a tribe became the center of idolatrous or false worship in Israel. It is the tribe that is mentioned in the time of the judges, who set up a false Levitical system, and also when the kingdom was divided after the reign of Solomon, Jeroboam set up a calf in Dan to lead the children of Israel away from the true worship of the King of Israel. Another incident that we read of someone being described as a serpent is in Jeremiah 46, verses 20 to 22. And that is a description used of Egypt. So Jeremiah writes of Egypt in verse 20 that Egypt is a very pretty heifer. But in verse 22, we're told that the sound of her is like the sound of a serpent. And we know that the Egyptians were the worshippers of many, many false gods, gods that were in total opposition to the God of Israel. And that is why God sent the 10 plagues on Egypt. Another country or people that is called a serpent is Babylon and their king Nebuchadnezzar. And we read of that in Jeremiah 51, verse 34. In Jeremiah 51, verse 34, we're told that Israel says, Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, has devoured me. He has crushed me. He has made me an empty vessel and swallowed me up like a sea serpent. What was Babylon? Babylon was the center of false worship, and it is a story that runs all the way through the Bible, right up until the end of the New Testament in the book of Revelation. Babylon becomes symbolic of false religion. Where else do we read about people being called serpents, snakes, or vipers? Well, we know that John the Baptist in Matthew 3, verse 7, called the Pharisees and Sadducees vipers. If we turn that up, we see that John the Baptist, when everybody was coming to be baptized of him, said, when John saw the Pharisees and Sadducees coming to his baptism, he said to them, brood of vipers, who has warned you to flee from the wrath to come? And who were the Pharisees and Sadducees? They were the religious leaders of Israel that had led them into apostasy. We know that Jesus said that the scribes and Pharisees and the Sadducees were hypocrites, and they taught for doctrines the commandments of men. And interestingly, we also find that Jesus calls the scribes and Pharisees hypocrites, and we find that in Matthew 23, verse 31. If we turn there, we read that Jesus says to the scribes and Pharisees that they were witnesses against themselves that they were the sons of those who murdered the prophets. He says, fill up then the measure of your father's guilt, you serpents, you brood of vipers. So in these quotes, we have an interesting concept, but a concept which shows us that it is people and nations that are referred to as serpents. Number one, people that came from the tribes of Israel. Number two, a foreign power called Egypt, which we know God calls us to come out of. Number three, Babylon, which is right through Scripture and right into the New Testament in the last book of the Bible, Revelation, representative of all false religion. Then the leaders of Jesus' day, and they are spoken of as serpents and vipers by John and Jesus himself. So what does this teach us? This teaches us that the word serpent becomes synonymous with the way that the serpent thought in the Garden of Eden. It was a deceitful creature, and it was full of cunning, and it exercised an intelligence that went against the thinking of God. But nowhere have we read that this serpent is a fallen angel. What we have read over and over, and I have taken you to just a few passages, is that the serpent and those who are described as having serpent qualities are people, and they are all falsely religious. They do not worship God, but they are people who have followed